Greetings, urban farmers, gardeners, and healthy food visionaries. Farmer Greg here, and welcome to the 584th episode of the Urban Farm Podcast, where every day we work together to educate and inspire you to become part of your food revolution. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you probably already heard me talk about the Edible Backyard Summit. It's a 3-day online food growing inspiration and education event. Thousands joined us for our summits in 2020, and we're at it again. If you enjoy the Urban Farm Podcast, then I can pretty much guarantee you that you're going to love the Edible Backyard Summit. It's just like the podcast in that it's free, and you'll learn a lot from experts in their fields. And unlike the podcast, you get to see the presenters and have your questions answered live. Plus, there's usually some fun conversation happening in the chat box for those who want to join in. The upcoming Edible Backyard Summit airs live March 23rd through the 25th with informative presentations that food growers of all kinds will enjoy. Whether you are an inspiring newbie or a seasoned expert, and whether you live in an apartment or have acres to grow on, you'll learn principles to follow when you plan and place your garden, regenerative composting techniques, patio farming for small spaces, hacks for year-round gardening, and lots more. To sign up for free, head over to ediblebackyardsummit.com. And if you have friends and family that love to garden, please invite them too. This is a great opportunity to do something fun virtually with other food growers in your life. If you're ready for some spring gardening inspiration for your most vibrant, healthy, and self-reliant life, I invite you to join me for the Edible Backyard Summit. Sign up at ediblebackyardsummit.com and get ready to create the edible yard of your dreams. Welcome, everybody. Greg Peterson coming to you from the Urban Farm in the heart of Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm here with Bill McDorman. Hello, Mr. McDorman.
Hello. It's nice to see you.
Right? This is the first time we've done this on Zoom.
Yeah. How many seed chats have we done?
Oh my gosh, probably 50.
Well, yeah, it's good to see you. So
yeah, thanks, right back at you, man.
Yeah.
So tonight we're talking about what was it? Whys, where, and wherefores of seed saving. And I'm not quite sure what that means, but let's just go ahead and jump in and see where it goes. So tell me a little bit about seed saving and what it means, Bill.
Well, for me, it's only the most important thing humans should be doing right now.
Amen to that.
I mean, we need, depending on your view of the world, there are some things that need to change. And in my mind, when I think about all the things, especially the big and the major things that need to change, seed saving would help them all, if not fundamentally change them. You know, they could bring healthy food into our lives. They could shore up our global food supply lines. Mm-hmm. So that we don't have shortages like we just saw in Texas.
Yep.
People had their own big time. People always seem amazed, Greg, and you've been saying this for years, that they're surprised when grocery stores run out of food in 6 or 8 hours and there's no more food for days to come in, right? It's just such a fragile system.
Yeah.
And we know we like the food more. People all over the world like their fresh tomatoes and things better. So it's, that would make us feel better. And if you get involved in the seed saving part, you're automatically building community usually because you've got more seeds than you know what to do with. So you have to share them.
Well, that goes to exactly what I've been saying for over a decade. And that's this whole notion of lack. There not being enough. The only place that lives is between our ears.
Right.
Because when I look at the abundance in that picture behind you, the abundance of sunflowers, and the picture behind me, these are peach trees in my yard, and I will get hundreds of pounds of peaches off of those trees here in the next 90 days or so. It's just, there's this level of abundance in fruit and seed that is just mind-blowing.
Well, we've got all these myths that make people think that they can't or shouldn't save their own seeds. And so, I mean, even if you can only afford the space or the time, the energy, or the money to grow one plant in one pot, grow an einkorn for us. We need to increase the seeds. And I'll send you an einkorn seed, and you can send me 50 back. And you're helping farmers, that want hundreds of pounds to start growing, new drought tolerant, higher protein, ancient and heritage grains, which are all the rage now because they seem to
Ooh,
cause less problems as far as gluten's concerned.
yeah. Ooh. Send me some. I'll plant a row or two of them here at the urban farm.
Well,
I'm in.
rows are great. We want whatever. We've got a heritage grain program going at the Rocky Mountain Seed Lines, and that's what we're doing. I think we have 185 people now, growing grains out for us. And the idea is we send you seed, and then you send us back twice as much, and then we can send that out to other people. And that way, our whole region can, number one, have enough seed to give to our farmers at some point. And we need those farmers, and we need that large scale. But large scale farmers aren't good at starting with 50 seeds.
Right.
So it's up to us, the gardeners, to do that, and even one plant. So everybody can do this. And I'm of the opinion now, after watching this for a long time, is that if you do that, if you grow something like an einkorn plant in a pot in your house and save the seed from it and replant them and start to share them in your community, you're going to change everything. It'll change your own consciousness about the earth and what, we're all going through and how fragile it is. It will maybe inspire your kids or your grandkids, right? Because they're going to say, Grandma, what is that? And it is the absolute essential thing we need right now to reclaim our own local food and grain economies.
Yeah.
Which is so important in the face of climate change and political disruption. And so, wow, that's why seed saving is so important.
Yeah. Well, and without local seeds, you can't have local food.
Right.
Right.
I spoke at the Slow Seed Summit. They called it
How was
for
that?
Slow Food USA. And that I modified the argument. You can't have slow food without slow seeds. It's just part and parcel of it in the end. And so, it's time to have every slow food member and grower start to save some seeds. And it's really easy. We've talked about that. There are 5 vegetables that are the most popular.
They are.
That are largely self-pollinating. So you don't have to worry about them crossing. You don't have to worry about anything. You just save the seeds when they go to seed. And something like lettuce goes to seed anyway.
My gosh. So I let lettuce go to seed in my front yard. And last year sometime, I was walking the dog and the house across the street from me had a lettuce plant growing in their lawn.
And it's from your lettuce going to seed, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
It had to be.
Well, they have the little parachutes. And again, so you just can't help but be involved in your community, and it doesn't matter what the politics are of your neighbor. If you're both, sharing lettuce.
Eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're growing gardens and sharing food and seeds, who cares?
Well, going back to the abundance thing, I had this very interesting experiment happen to me about 3 years ago. I had this guy who claimed, oh yeah, I know how to plant seeds, no problem. And so I wanted him to plant out a couple of rows of carrots here at the urban farm. And I gave him 6 ounces of carrot seeds that I had saved from the year before. It was like that much. So it was a fair amount of lettuce seeds. I figured he would take, 50, 75, 150 seeds and plant them. He planted the whole thing. He planted all, 80,000 seeds, which is probably what was in there. And I ended up with a forest of carrots in my front yard a couple of years ago. And, they were
Is that a class 1 error?
No, it's not. It's magic. So it could have been a class 1 error. In permaculture, we have class 1 errors, and that's like errors you can't fix. Well, this didn't net us any carrots to eat, but what it did net us was a 5-gallon bucket of carrot seeds that I harvested. There's that abundance piece, right?
Yeah, so here it is.
And the other thing that it did is it wild planted carrots in my front yard. So this was 3 years ago that this happened, and Heidi, literally an hour and a half ago, Heidi harvested some carrots that were growing wild in our front garden beds for our dinner tonight. And I cleaned them and I cut them up we're making some Thai food tonight. And again, one of my favorite things to do is to let things just grow wild in my yard. Now, I planted carrots. I planted parsley a decade ago. I planted basil a decade ago. I planted nasturtiums 2 decades ago. And I have the food forest set up here that they just come back year after year after year. doing the circular regenerative system rather than the flat one where I have to buy seeds every year and plant seeds every year and harvest the food. And then, oh yeah, I got to go to the seed catalog again and buy more seeds.
Well, we're in an interesting era still. I went to the Johnny's Selected Seeds website a few days ago, and there's a big sign up saying, sorry, if you're a regular gardener, we're not selling seeds to you right now. We're overwhelmed by our commercial growers. And, there was talk of a waiting list. But so what happens if you go to buy your seeds and they're not there? And what happens if they're out? I've been searching through seed sites today for us, for the Great American Seed Up, looking for alternative sources. And it's amazing how many things are out of stock, especially in larger quantities.
Right.
And so that's kind of what we're talking about, that, that's another one of those problems that the world is facing. Increased population, disrupted global supply lines, so it makes sense to, bring this back in. And I really think a lot of people don't or haven't thought about it because we've almost been trained not to.
Right.
Because
getting food is so easy.
Well, and we think it's so complicated and so, that we're going to make a mistake. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. And one of the things I saw this past week that I'm really excited about is that one of the best breeders and teachers we've ever had at our seed schools, Joseph Lofthouse, has just written a book, and it's just about to come out. It's called Land Race Gardening.
Ooh.
And I was lucky enough to hear a presentation that Joseph gave at the Organic Seed Alliance conference, the Seed Growers Conference. And it was really quite funny because, the Organic Seed Growers Conference is all about technical and getting your chops up and learning from experts and learning all the rules and learning how to breed from breeders and starting complicated programs that keep really good data and so on and so forth, and which is really important for them because they're growing at large scale.
Right.
That's what they're training people to do. And you need that uniformity and all the rules to do that. So they plopped Joseph down in a breeding. He's got a reputation now. I think he's on the boards of the Open Source Seed Initiative and the Galactic Tomato Group. And I mean, the World Tomato Growers, I guess that's what it's called. So anyway, he gets invited. He gives his workshop and basically says, when they ask him about what specific and exact protocols do you have to set up your seed growing and which rules do you follow and what data do you collect? He said, no, I mix everything together that I get, whether they're my beans or my melons. He's got rice projects. He's got all these projects going. I mix them all together. I mean, he says, I don't mix up cantaloupes with watermelons, but all the watermelons I mix together. And then I just plant them all. And I want them to mix. And I only save the seeds from the melons I really like to eat. That's what and that doesn't take writing down anything.
Right.
It's really, and he said, once I started doing that, it just freed me to get involved again. And if you think about it, that's what humans have been doing for 10,000 years. That's how we got the whole food system. There's no way to argue that this isn't efficient and effective. Look at what we're eating. We're eating parsnips and carrots and all these things that were once wild plants that have been bred in this Joseph Lofthouse land race gardening method. And so, when I first started teaching about seed saving, it was really hard to convince people that you didn't need the experts to do this. You just get people started. And that was a hard thing. Get people started. It's so magical, and it's so abundant, as you say. But now we've got experts writing books that have gone through their whole lives and come back around and decided this is really where it's at. And I love that. I think it's the dawn of a new era.
It's a magical era. You mentioned the Great American Seed Up. You can find out about it at greatamericanseedup.org. Just a quick story about that. Bill, Bell, and I were having a conversation one day about 6 years ago about how do we impact our local seed economies? How do we make the biggest difference we can? And we put together the Great American Seed Up. It was a great big bazaar in a 10,000 square foot room where people could come and scoop up their own seeds. And it was magic. Imagine 2 years ago, we had 800 people in a room scooping seeds. It was the energy was palpable. You could feel it in there. And then COVID happened last year. And so what we did is we had to put together our do-it-yourself kits. So we have what's called seed up in a box, and these are open pollinated seeds. And I think we have about 80 different varieties. So you can find out about that at greatamericanseedup.org. But this goes back to a conversation that you and I had, Bill, about oh my gosh, about 9 years ago at my seed school in Tucson in 2011. And that was, how do we create systems of local seed viability? And so let me just throw that at you. How do we create systems for local seed viability?
Well, we're started from a really alienated, I would call it technological, industrial, globalized food system, and where people don't even know,
Mm-hmm.
that they can save their own seeds. They've been pretty much taught that. The market set it up with hybrids, and now they're starting to patent varieties, that discourage people from trying to save their own seeds. Even the popular seed books that we have for sale, Susan Ashworth Seed to Seed, are hugely complicated. And that book in particular starts, the table of contents is in Latin.
Oh my gosh.
Because they want you to learn, the Latin names of the families. And that's important. That's all good information. But if you just want to start to learn to save your own seeds, you may not want to shell out more for a book than you do all your seeds the first year.
Right.
Like why do that? So we're starting from a pretty, pretty hard space to do all of this. And so, I think what we figured out, Greg, was that first of all, you got to get seeds to people to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And 90% of the cost of a packet of seeds is in the packaging and the whole distribution system that we have. If you order them over the internet, or if you go down to your hardware store,
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did was we went way up in the chain to almost the farmers themselves. Turns out that there are open pollinated land race varieties, the best of what we had in this country 2 generations ago, some of which is still being grown in large scale. And there are a few people that contract them to grow, and they bring it in and clean it and bag it and make it available. And so we went to those people. This is almost farm direct, and brought them straight into Phoenix, big bags of seeds. And then we poured it into, in this case, buckets. I think all we could get were popcorn buckets, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Keep it cheap. Set up a huge big room with tables filled with popcorn buckets filled with seeds with scoopers in them. And then we figured out how much it would cost per scoop for seeds. So it's like, it's 90% less cost just off the bat, because you're doing your own packaging. We have little bags there. We have little cards that explain, it tells what it is and how to grow it. So it's like a seed packet. And people would scoop, grab the card, put it in a bag, and then line up. And then we would, check them out. And as you said, 800 people, going at it at once. It was just incredible. And we've been doing this for a number of years now. And what we realize is that there are now thousands of people who have come down to these seed ups. And while they're getting ready to go through the lines and scoop out their seeds, either before and after, they're invited to take courses on how to do it. We try to inspire people. We teach them how to save their seeds, how to store them.
Mm-hmm.
Kari does a great class on how to start them. So we get just people off the street that kind of think it's a good idea. There's a lot of prepper kind of thinking going on. People aren't dumb. Everybody's a little bit nervous,
Mm-hmm.
Don't know what else is coming down the pike. And so people would show up, and we could run them through in just a couple of hours, get them all the seeds they need, teach them how to save them, teach them how to store them, and send them on their merry way. And now we've done that. You keep doing that for a few years in your city. And I really believe we're making an impact.
Oh, huge. Yeah.
And now I think we've got even a bigger potential for that impact because of COVID. We can't get 800 people together anymore. So what we did was design mini seed ups in groups of 10. So even as small as 10, if you got a local seed library or a community garden or just friends around you or your prepper club, whatever it is, you can order in batches of 10. The people still have to scoop them out, still have to put them in their bags. So, we don't do all the packaging work. I mean, it costs more for us to do this than it did just to pour it into buckets, but we pass on huge savings to be able to do that. And you can order these online, and you can do seed ups now wherever you want. And so when we invite, that's what we want, isn't it, Greg? Is seed ups all over the place.
Well, and that's, the first conversation I had with you back in 2011 was, how do we put a seed bank in Phoenix? And I went out and bought this huge chest freezer, 25 cubic foot chest freezer, and filled it full of seeds. And okay, now we have a seed bank, but what's the problem with that?
They die eventually.
Eventually they die, but also they're all in my garage in a freezer.
Right.
So
And the
that's where
climate's changing and nobody's growing them.
So that's where we went to the idea of how do we spread it around, and here's the question I have for y'all out there. And if you have questions for us, shoot them over to us. But my question for you is, how do you invigorate your local seed economy? Do you start a seed library? Do you start a seed bank? What are we going to do? Because we're in this together. We have to figure out this together. We can't count on a government agency to figure this out for us. We have to do it ourselves.
Yeah, I'm afraid the government agencies involved in seeds are all under stress. Nobody's coming to help. I don't believe that. Doesn't mean there aren't good people and good things being done all over, but our recent vice president does not believe in evolution. How do you run an agriculture department with seed planning for the next 1,000 years that involves evolution at every step of the way and changing our crops to adapt to the new realities? If you don't believe in evolution, I mean, that's just one of the funding problems I think they've had.
So you mentioned earlier 5 easy crops to save. What are they?
Peas, beans, tomatoes, peppers, lettuce.
So they're all selfers. Can you say what that is?
Well, self-pollinating means that the flower structure itself is physically designed so that they exchange pollen and go through sexual reproduction before the flowers even open, by and large. In nature, never say never. But what it means is that, you don't have to worry about, somebody 3 or 4 blocks away growing a tomato you don't like and having that cross with your tomato in your backyard. Mm-hmm. And so that's, it's just save the seeds. And so, and that's what we encourage beginners. Learn how to pick one crop you're passionate about. People always say, so what do I start with? Start with the thing you love the most.
What you love to eat. There you go.
Yeah, and learn how to do that. And fortunately, peas, beans, lettuce, tomatoes and peppers are in the top 10 of what most Americans like. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty easy. We can, knock out a lot of stuff just by getting people to do their favorites.
So peas, beans, lettuce,
right,
and peppers, those are super easy to save. You take the peas, beans, lettuce, and peppers. Peas and beans, those are just the bean pods, right?
Right. Yeah, just let them dry as much as you can. Yeah.
And then break them open and you have the seeds.
Yeah. Not everybody realizes that. We had people come into the native seed search store and bought beans, Yellow Woman Indian beans, big bag, 5-pound bag. We used to sell the beans. She was going to cook with them. They're in our food section. And then she was at the cash register and said, so where do I buy the seeds for these?
Yeah.
It's like, well,
we just don't know.
You just bought 5 pounds.
Right. Plant away. Exactly.
And so that there's a lesson. Mm-hmm. Almost everything that you see around you could probably plant. People ask me that all the time. Can I plant stuff from the grocery store? Sure. If you really love it.
Yeah,
they say, well, can I save the seeds from a pepper I get at the grocery store? Well, it's really likely that it's a hybrid pepper. Mm-hmm. In other words, it's, an intentional cross. And what that means is that the offspring that you will, you're going to save those seeds and plant them, that may not look like the parents. It's because that's a new cross. And so, but it might be fun. You might get something you really like anyway. And so I always encourage you, no matter what, if you really enjoy something, like it's the best pepper or tomato you've bitten into at a restaurant or wherever it is, I always try to save some seeds and bring them home. This system is so magical and so adaptable that, try it. See what happens.
So lettuce seeds, those are super simple. It puts up a flower and you grab the seeds.
They're little parachutes.
Yep.
And they'll start flying away. And those little parachutes, actually, lettuce seeds come in 10 packs. In other words, they're sort of organized so that the seeds are fused together. And I've had people in class say, so Bill, how do I get those all apart into the clean little lettuce seeds I buy in packets? So it looks like that. And I go, I don't care. I plant 10 packs.
Right.
I plant them dirty. I mean, so again, this is some of this cult of expertise This is some of what we've been taught about seeds in an industrial system. You need the seeds individual. You need them clean if you're selling packets on racks or usually through mail order. I get that. But as home gardeners, we're free from all of that. We can just do what we want and get it to work in the best way that we figure out. And so if you like that, you can do it. But if you don't want to do that work, I think many lettuce seed savers now have figured out in most areas of the country, you just don't save them at all. You just let your lettuce go to seed, and that's it. Next spring, there's some of it coming up again.
That's right. I have lettuce growing in my lawn.
Well, and does all of it come up? No. Does a lot of it get destroyed? Yes. Some of it freezes, dries, whatever. But guess what? The ones that figure it out in your yard, that's what you're looking for anyway. Yeah, congratulations. You are an expert seed breeder. You have selected for the absolute best lettuce for your yard by simply ignoring it. We're just lucky to be here,
Exactly. All right. So we talked about 4 of them. The 5th one is tomatoes, and they're a little bit different on how you save the seeds, but it is still super simple. Can you just touch real quickly on?
I mean, if you're eating a tomato sandwich in Portugal, and the tomato's just blowing you away, you can just reach into the tomato and pull out a couple of seeds and put them in a napkin and bring them home, and they'll work. Okay, so you can just take the seeds out. But a better way to save them is to do what we call the wet method. And what that means is that if you'll take a tomato and cut it at the equator, so, set it up like the North Pole and the South Pole. The North Pole is where, it came off the vine.
Yep.
Cut it at the equator and then squeeze out all that jelly stuff with the seeds into a jar. And if you can do that with several, say you're saving, for several on a plant that you really like, and get, I use little teeny pint jars, and I get about this much stuff in the bottom. I pour in just a little bit of water so that I make sure they don't dry out in a 5 to 7 day period. And then I stir it up, and I put it in a place that I want to be, where you're washing the dishes out of the sun, in your home, that someplace you won't forget about them. And look at it every day and stir it. And after 2 or 3 or 4 days, depending on where you are and how warm it is, a white fungus will grow on the top. That's bread mold. That's telling you the whole thing's working. Inside, embedded in the tomato and that jelly, is a yeast, a wild yeast that will start to break down the jelly. And so that jelly keeps seeds actually from germinating. That's why they don't germinate in the tomato when it's warm and moist. And so you want to get rid of that if you can. I mean, it'll dry and crack off if you just save the seeds, but an easier way is to let that natural yeast eat it and break it down. So after 3 or 4 days, you stir it up, and the good seeds fall to the bottom. And any that aren't good or haven't been fully formed, and all the other gunk floats to the top. And you've got seeds at the bottom. So what I do then is pour more water into my jar. I stir it up good, and I pour more water into the jar. And that helps separate it even more. And the good seeds go to the bottom. And then I pour out all that gunk on the top. Be sure not to pour out your seeds. We just stop before you get to the seeds at the bottom. Fill it up with water again. Let the seeds settle. Pour it out again. Do that 2 or 3 times, and they're clean. So then I pour them through a strainer to get all the water out of them. And then I take that strainer and I pop it onto a paper towel upside down, and I get a little tomato seed cookie, I call it. And that starts to dry out over the next 2 or 3 days. And then you can rub those with your hand to get them all, apart. And voila, you've got your tomato seeds like they would come from a seed company. In fact, they've just been treated for almost all the known seed-borne diseases. That process of the fungus and the yeast actually treats those seeds. It's the way tomatoes rot in among themselves if they fell onto the jungle floor. They learned how to do this a million years ago, and we're just kind of helping that process.
Yeah. And Penn Parmenter, she does tomatoes at 10,000 foot elevation in Colorado. She uses coffee filters.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, those work.
Yeah, no, that's a really great idea, because the paper's a little more smooth and the seeds don't stick as much. But you know what? Everything works.
Yeah.
I put it on toilet paper one time, and I couldn't get them back off. They were stuck, and they were just kind of meshed in there. I just planted the whole toilet paper thing. I mean, it's really, I mean, there's no, it's hard to make a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we have a bunch of questions here. We had a couple of questions come in before we actually started up. And one of them, I think, and forgive me if I got this wrong, but I think this came from Holly. On your seed hunting trips, how do you decipher a location? And I'm assuming this is for wild flowers and that kind of stuff.
Well, it could be, or, I went to Siberia looking for tomatoes.
Oh, yes.
So that was because I had eaten a Siberian tomato, and I went to Siberia looking for more. Tomatoes are so popular. I had my small seed company, High Altitude Gardens, and so I was looking for something that would work in the, that was cold tolerant, that tasted good, that would work high in the mountains. And so sometimes I've had really specific ideas, but now I decide to go collect wildflower seeds based on the season. So I know
Yes.
when they're going to be ready, and
Mhm.
you can't always nail that, but you can time travel a bit. So say I go back to Idaho now, where I know my backyard and I could collect wild seeds. If I get there and it's been a late spring and I'm there too early, I'll actually go down in elevation in a river valley where spring came sooner,
Mhm.
2 weeks to a month sooner. Or if I'm too early, or too late, I'll go up. You can climb 1,000 feet and move a month in climate in the mountains. And so, there's little tricks like that. So, but now my answer to that question generally is, I try to find seeds everywhere I go, every time I go there. Yeah. And I always take some on trips to trade.
Yes.
So that way you don't have to go looking for them yourself, but you just bring up the conversation. If there's a seed person within a mile, they'll hear that you're there looking for seeds, and they'll bring in their best stuff. You've got yours, and then it's a party, and that's really, and then you've got friends for life, and you get to hear the story that comes with the seeds, which is really important.
Holly says, someone smashed a pumpkin on my neighbor's porch, and the following summer, pumpkin plants started growing next to the porch.
Yeah, there you go.
It's really that simple.
Say thank you.
and save the pumpkin seeds.
Yeah.
Deborah says, I saved heirloom zucchini squash seeds, costata romanesco, cured on the plant. Are they true to variety if they are next to another zucchini? She says she likes the performance of that variety.
Well, so you are true is a subjective, if not platonic idea. It doesn't exist in plants.
Mm-hmm.
They're constantly changing. And it's really possible, if you have two different zucchinis growing in the same garden, that there are some crosses. Mm-hmm. But it's also really possible there aren't. So how do you find out? Save the seeds and plant them.
Plant them out.
And you know what? Even if you don't like the best what comes up because of the cross or the other variety that comes up or whatever it is, you can still eat everything or give them to your neighbors or trade them, right? You're still gardening. And then sharpen your eye, look for the ones that are exactly like the ones you want, tie a little ribbon on them, let them, blow it out and go to seed for later. And then that way only save the ones from your true zucchinis that now have 2 years of adaptation in your garden to your particular climate, which is you're gaining every time you grow on safe seeds where you are. Yeah. So that's really what you want to do. Now, if you're a commercial farmer, if you're going to work every day and you've got 15 acres of zucchinis and you're looking for seed, it would take you a number of generations to make that your line, so to speak, uniform enough doing this way, to get it to work at a commercial level. But, as a home gardener, you can eat them every year, all the so-called off types, and get closer to what you want. And my guess is, and this is what I've seen happen over and over and over again now, is that your idea of what true is and what off type is will evolve in this process. And you'll actually end up saving to something that you never dreamed that you would start saving in the beginning, because you're listening now. You got a dance going. It's talking to you. Yeah. Right? And that's the magic. That's where the best breeders are that I know now. They're saying, and it's like Dr. Carol Deppe, who, taught genetics at Harvard for 25 years. She said, the more I listen and the more I look and the more I let those plants tell me what to save, better off it gets.
Yeah.
She said, I came in with all preconceived notions, rigid, how this was all going to work. And she said, I've let go of all of that like Joseph has now. And I'm just in there, dancing with it and trying to find my way forward. And for me, that's where the magic is. In fact, it's so magic. I don't have to go to a church building now to go to church. That's where I go to church.
In your garden. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're so set on us knowing better than nature. We need to set that aside. We need to set that aside. This is a great question from Holly. How do you know when you can name your own variety versus using and giving credit to someone else for that variety?
Well, there are no seed naming police. I'll just tell you. Nobody's ever going to come. Nobody's ever been busted.
Mm-hmm.
What you want is respect in your community if you're doing this. You want people that respect you for what you're doing. And to do that, what I've learned is that give credit where credit's due.
Mm-hmm.
That builds community and builds respect. That's just all there is to it. But there are, I think there are way more opportunities for people now to start naming things. Number one is the person who gave you the seeds may give you the green light, say, yeah, you go ahead and name it. I wasn't interested in naming it, or I've got 40 other varieties I'm working on, Somebody needs to name this, because when you name it, you're owning it, right? And that's what we've lost, is this ownership of our own seeds and our own sense of place around it. So it's a really important thing. But again, we're looking, we're growing up in systems where there's externalized laws and rules, and there's police to police those things, or fines for it, and they're just not there. Yeah. And so as a community, we're starting to figure this out more and more on our own. And I've gotten into big arguments with people around that, but I do believe this has happened more than we give it credit. And I think what we're learning now is that a lot of that was racial, and when there's more extant diversity in heirloom vegetables in the United States, in North America, in Appalachia, than there is anywhere else in the country. There's just more different kinds of varieties of everything. Mm-hmm. Showing, that there was this huge system to create all that stuff, and the immigrants that came there, and the gardening was good or whatever. And it's not unusual to find 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 names for the same exact plant, depending on whether you live north of the Mason-Dixon line or south of it. Mm-hmm. Into different, whether you fought for the Union Army or the Confederate Army, which you couldn't eat those damned Yankee, John Brown beans or whatever they were. But you're growing the same beans, they just have a different name. Right. And so we have a lot to learn about that whole thing. But I'm if you have to make a mistake, this is my own personal, name it. Because what the world needs now is people that take care of their own heirloom treasures. We need seed stewards. And if stewarding will help you and your family take care of it for generations, like Pop's tomato that Penn talks about, that was a 100-year-old heirloom that was brought to Colorado that she ran into, that almost died out, that some of the grandkids gave her seeds to, and they named it Pop's because it was their grandfather's, and that was his nickname. Well, right. If it's Pop's tomato name that'll save that tomato, do it. That's what we need. Create your story so that everyone around you has reverence for it, and use that as your guide.
That story is, you're right, it creates magic around it, kind of like Mrs. Burns' lemon basil.
Yes. That native seed search has. Yeah. And I was lucky enough to work with Barney Burns, whose mother was the one who brought that to Tucson in the early 1900s.
Wow. Kiersey says, can I plant winter rye or winter wheat early in the spring and grow them to maturity in Colorado, or should I wait till the fall and plant them then?
That's another place where we get hung up in categories that are important for industrial farming. In other words, if you're a wheat or a rye farmer, and you have 2 seasons to grow, usually a winter season, what that means is they'll plant in the fall, and the plants will get up a bit, and then the snow will come, and they'll survive the winter, and then they come early in the spring, and you can harvest in June or something. So that would be a winter wheat. And then A summer wheat would be one you'd plant as soon as you could in the spring, and you'd harvest in July, August, September, depending on the variety. And you damn well better know what you're planting, what variety you have that favors either one of those if you're growing 1,000 acres. What we're learning, there were 30,000 varieties of wheat growing in the United States, probably, or around the world in 1900. 30,000 different,
Wow.
viable on some commercial, small scale, or whatever personal village level. And so there's huge diversity out there, and we're starting to dip our hands back into that and find it again. And so then the question becomes, oh, is that a winter wheat or a summer or a spring wheat? And you go, I'm not sure that people, 4,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent had that distinction. And so what we're learning is that if you're doing this small scale and you have enough seed, try it, both. At Native Seed Search, we planted white Sonora in October, November, December, January, February, March, April, and May one year, just to see when it would work.
Yeah.
Turns out it worked really well planted in November, which was a winter wheat thing, but it also worked pretty well planted, in April.
Nice.
So it's almost a two crop. And so you can't allow those labels. I think as we're small scale, we're rediscovering, we're inhabiting this space. That's another one of those labels that I'm learning to question. So
question everything with seeds. That's my takeaway.
Well, and there may be one seed in your winter wheat. Maybe everything else gets wiped out because it's too hot this summer. Maybe you wait till spring and you plant, you're going to do it as a summer wheat and it all gets wiped out. But there's one plant that makes it because it's got the built-in drought tolerance from somewhere in the Egyptian pyramid days, which is really possible.
Yeah.
Right? Then that's what you save. And you're starting your own summer variety of that variety of wheat for your area. That's what you have to be looking for.
There you go.
Go hard on them. If you have a complete disaster, that's the best thing that ever happens to you. Because if anything makes it at all, boy, you've got something that made it through your disaster. Yeah. And you're down the road to overcoming it in the future.
So I got one more question for you, and then we're going to wrap it up. Remember the whole thing that happened last year where China was shipping seeds randomly to people in the United States? Did you catch any more data on why?
Nobody, as far as I know, nobody ever figured that out, the real source of that. And, in some ways that's disturbing. What is it? What's going on? Who's doing this? But, we're living in an era where there are millions of people subscribing to weird theories about things that are going on. The rabbit holes of the social media have created all sorts of, it's almost like kabuki theater some days. And so, I've learned, I did some research and it really, I have not heard any deleterious or dangerous things that have come out of that. I don't know who grew them and who didn't. And I think somebody said the USDA was asking people not to grow them just in case.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I wouldn't. Nobody sent them to me. And if I had to isolate a place, I don't know.
Grow them and see what happens.
Yeah. What if they're gifts?
Don't tell anybody.
They're from the Qigong, seed saving group in some mountainous area of China, and they're just gifts for all of us. Maybe that's what they were. I don't know. I'd like to stay positive.
Well, there you go. Thank you very much once again, Bill. I so appreciate it. Let's see here. Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. Where do we find out more about the grain trials?
RockyMountainSeeds.org. And you can look at our programs and pull down it's our Heritage Grain Trials. We've got about 200 grains available that we found that we think will work in our region going back, 14,000 years, some of the varieties. Wow. We've got the einkorns and emmers and spelts and they're higher. Einkorn's 42% protein. It's amazing. Wow. Health food, and now we found a variety that free threshes. Doesn't have a hull, so it doesn't have to be dehulled. So that's the kind of stuff we're looking for. And we'd love to have as many people as possible involved, And then we've got seed steward programs. We're starting a seed teacher training next week. So if you want to learn how to be a seed teacher, we've done our own seed schools now for 10 years. We've trained hundreds of students. We figure now that's not enough. We need millions of seed savers.
Yeah.
There's 120 million gardeners. Why aren't they all saving seeds? So
Right.
we need more seed teachers. So we're teaching people how to do their own seed schools.
Well, and the bonus of the Seed Teachers program is that you get into Seed School online for free if you sign up for the Seed.
Right. And that's something that, is available through the urban farm. So
Yep,
that's really a great,
exactly.
and that's a tight little program. If you want to learn how to save seeds, that's like 35 years experience boiled down into a 7-day seed program that we did for years. And then we boiled that down into a seed school in a day. And then we took that into 7 1-hour lectures.
Yep.
And so that's a highly refined, like no bullshit, just get to the point, and each how to save them, how to find them, what the industry is like. So, your way around, how to start seed libraries. It's all in there. It's great.
And you can find out about that at seedschoolonline.com.
Yeah, that's good.
All right.
And then you're starting to do Seed Up Saturdays.
Oh, yeah. So through Urban Farm U, the 4th Saturday of February, May, and August, we do a 3-hour session called Seed Up Saturday, where we're, just teaching people about different things around seed saving. So definitely check up seedupsaturday.com for the next upcoming event.
That's the energy that we learn to create in our seed ups, right?
Yeah.
And we can't do them. People aren't coming yet. And so, you can come to the seed up, seed education part and excitement part and ask questions. It'll be online like this. So it'll be great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
As always, I appreciate it. And thank you everybody out there for showing up. For those of you that are listening on the podcast, thanks for listening to the Urban Farm Podcast as well. So as I always like to say, farm out, and we will catch you on the flip side.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Urban Farm Podcast. Remember to listen for tips, advice, and resources to help you on your journey with urban farming. You can find us on the web at urbanfarm.org or send us an email to podcast@urbanfarm.org. In the words of Vincent van Gogh, great things are done by a series of small things brought together. Be encouraged that with each lesson learned and skill developed, you are one step closer in the direction of your dreams.